For Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser here with the Athletics NBA managing editor Tyler Batiste, a title that essentially, I guess, makes you like the Joe Dumars of the NBA in recent years. We're about to, or something. I don't know what the hell his old title was of the NBA. I'm just going to start this over entirely because of your confusion.
I was just gonna go with it. I wasn't expecting to be compared to Joe Dumars so early on, but I was just gonna roll with it.
For Louisiana versus all y'all, Jarrett Roser here with the Athletics NBA managing editor Tyler Batiste, a title that essentially makes him like the Joe Dumars of the NBA. And so we'll talk a little bit about what's going on with Joe D, another Louisiana native heading on back home, as well as what's up with these NBA playoffs freshly on deck here. We actually, as we're recording this, are still waiting for the final two teams and at the 8 seeds in the East and West. But Tyler, you seem like you were going through all kinds of wheels spinning, gears turning in there, trying to sort all this out. What's going on with you at the moment?
Well, my first thought was, if I'm Joe Dumars, does that make you Isaiah Thomas or Bill Laimbeer?
There's a lot to unpack in both
Well,
of those angles.
and that's why you saw the wheels turning on my end. So just to give you and the listeners a little preview of what was going on in my head at that point. That's what I was thinking about. Not so much the title, but just kind of who you would be in this scenario. So, but other than that, I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's NBA playoff weekend. We're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk some about these Pelicans front office shuffles that went underway pretty immediately on the heels of their season finale this past Sunday. And yeah, I mean, I was going to just get even further behind the scenes and talk about what the last hour of our lives, and particularly my life, looked like, which is insanity. But let's just get right into basketball, I guess. And Sunday, the Pels season, which was, I think, if not abysmal, borderline abysmal, came to an end. And they are, instead of being a team that we thought might be in the thick of the Western Conference playoff logjam that we were watching unfold down the stretch there, they are the fourth best odds of the number one overall pick in the NBA draft. And we'll find out where that all lines up in mid-May with the draft lottery. But changes seemed like toward the end of the season we're getting inevitable to come, just some sort of shakeup for a franchise that has felt like it's kind of stuck on the treadmill of mediocrity for the past few years. And so David Griffin is out. Very quickly, news spreading that Joe Dumars was being targeted and that the deal was being finalized there. And so the announcement, I believe it was Tuesday, that Joe Dumars would be the Pels' new executive vice president of basketball operations. I guess as you watch all of this unfold, just kind of talk me through your perspective on where the Pels organization is at this point, the need for change, if you saw it that way, and to go get certainly a big name like a Joe Dumars, but a guy that attached with that name is he was executive of the year 2 decades ago. So a lot of his most prominent front office leadership is a little bit in the rear view, but now he's back into the fold, into his home state. Just kind of let's unpack all of it, man.
Yeah, I mean, first off, it's tough to kind of like pinpoint whether the Pelican struggles are organizational or if they just got a really bad hand dealt from the injury bug, in particular this year with Brandon Ingram. DeJounte Murray missed the start of the season and then ended up tearing his Achilles. Zion Williamson, obviously, and more, lower body issues, although he finished the season before they shut him down pretty strong. Like, it's tough to look at it and be like, how much of it, you can't like assign a percentage, like this is like 50% bad luck, 50%, some issues with the front office or ownership or whatever. But it probably had gotten to a point, just kind of the way the past few seasons have gone. Last year they made the play-in tournament. Zion gets hurt. They end up in the playoffs, and then a lot of expectations coming into this season after they got ousted by the Thunder a couple years ago. You remember they really pushed the Phoenix Suns, who had 60-something wins, really pushed them. I think that was without Zion as well, pushed them in the first round of the playoffs. So it's probably part, probably the time where like a change is needed on some level. I don't know how bad or what people may have looked at from, Trajan Langdon leaving last year, immediately going to Detroit, and them having sort of the bounce back that they had. Who knows? Who's to say whether that like played a role in kind of looking at, okay, David Griffin was here, maybe Trajan Langdon. I don't want to say maybe Trajan Langdon was doing a lot more behind the scenes or was the sort of brains behind the operation. No disrespect to David Griffin, who's had a long career, but maybe it was just kind of a situation where we needed to shake something up. Ownership's not going to change. Willie Green has probably done as good of a job as he can do with the roster and the talent that he's had available. And so once you look at those two things, it probably comes down to the front office. As you said, Joe Dumars is a guy who's been around the NBA for 40 years at this point.
Our lifetime, yeah.
Yeah, our entire lives, winning titles in Detroit as a player and as an executive. He put together that 2004 team that pulled a really big upset against the Lakers in 5 games with Chauncey Billups and Rip Hamilton and those guys. He was also, if I'm not mistaken, an advisor for the Kings up until a few years ago before he joined worked out of the league office. So the thing that stood out to me is that, who knows when this decision was made, but like it's pretty quickly to move to get a hire in place for Joe Dumars. Obviously, you would imagine that maybe the Pelicans or the folks over there had maybe pinpointed him as a front runner before the move was made. Seems like it's a trend that's happening a lot. We saw it in Sacramento like 2 days later, where Monty McNair was parted ways with the Kings, and then Scott Perry almost less than 24 hours later was kind of named in that executive role. So I don't know if that's the start of a trend or just kind of an interesting coincidence that all of this happened within the past week. But Joe Dumars obviously has front office experience. Running a front office, 10, 20 years ago is probably a little bit different than you would think it is now. There's analytics involved. You have people who are just kind of specifically geared toward managing like the salary cap and the CBA and everything that goes into that. So I think he's being in the league office. He probably has a fair amount of experience with all of those types of folks throughout the league. You would think that he is a smart enough guy to know what he doesn't know and to be able to hire people around him to try to get the Pelicans organization back on track. And you would imagine that a lot of those conversations happened already. Not that he was promised anything, but at least that there's kind of a singular focus by all levels of the organization on what the next steps are here, and the next step could be, Willie Green is still the coach, and it seems like Joe Dumars is going to be the person who sort of makes a decision on whether that continues to be the case or whether they need change on the bench as well. So we'll see what happens over the next, couple of weeks, couple of months, and heading into the lottery, the draft, and free agency.
I think that was the biggest thing with the timing to me, is that I do think that the Pels leadership had kind of zeroed in on the likelihood that a move was going to be made here, and so kind of identified, and it wasn't something that was actually decided and finalized in a 24-hour span, but had been kind of geared toward for a little while now. And I think with a desire to let whoever was going to fill that role, and now it becomes Joe Dumars, have some say in what was going to happen with Willie Green's status, I think they wanted to be able to move quickly so that he could then move quickly on that, knowing that this is going to be a pretty active summer of a lot of coaching movement on the carousel. I mean, we'll get into some of this in a little bit, but there's before the Kings got knocked out, there were 3 Western Conference playoff or play-in teams that were top 10 teams in the West, including 2 that were a little bit higher up in the seeding at one point, that made sweeping changes in the last month of the season. And so there's an awful lot of change and movement going on right now, and I think the Pels kind of wanted to get ahead of some of that.
Yeah, and I think kind of the Band-Aid has been ripped on sort of like surprising moves, and when they happen, I think the Luka trade earlier this year kind of really ripped the Band-Aid, and then with what happened with Taylor Jenkins and the Grizzlies and Michael Malone and the Nuggets, I feel like, kind of the as Mike Tomlin likes to say, the Jello has already been let out of the box. Like, I don't think there's any sort of transaction that happens at a certain time that could be as surprising as those. The Luka Doncic trade and, the Denver Nuggets, who won a title 2 years ago, firing their coach with, 3 or 4 games left in the season. So this kind of makes sense. Like you said, you maybe there were some conversations that were had and interest expressed through, Joe Dumars is a Louisiana guy. I'm sure that Joe Dumars and the folks in the Pelicans organization have some mutual friends and some folks that know each other to maybe signal interest, mutual interest over, the course of a certain time period. And it's only fair that whoever's coming in to lead the front office for the future plays a role in deciding who's going to lead it, in the present and the future. And like I said, Willie Green is, I think he did as good of a job as you can expect with the hand that he was dealt. You look at the Pelicans last year, they won almost 50 games. That's kind of what the expectations were coming into this year. And there's who's to say that, they can't get back there. We've seen that recently, and, teams sort of taking a step back before taking a large step forward. The Mavericks did it a couple years ago where they missed the play-in tournament completely and they made it to the NBA Finals. Other teams, the Thunder went from missing the play-in to the number 1 seed last year. So I'm not saying that the Pelicans have the structure in place to be able to do that, but we've seen examples in recent memory of teams making fairly large leaps without, sort of shaking things up completely. So, like I said, Joe Dumars is a smart guy. I'm sure he'll assess and reassess everything that's going on and put forth what he thinks is the best path for the organization.
With that move completed, now the eyes will turn to, we mentioned the evaluation of whether Willie Green is going to remain the coach of this team, as well as obviously as much of headline news right now for the Pels as anything is what happens with Zion Williamson. Does Joe Dumars lock into trying to continue to build around Zion, or do they make a change there? And I think that for all of the ups and downs of the franchise in recent years, I mean, as is the case with NBA basketball in general, the bulk of that is going to ebb and flow and swing on the guys that are on the court and the players, and particularly the stars, the faces of the franchise. And for Zion, it's been such a bumpy ride during the early years of his NBA career. When you look at kind of your expectation heading into this summer, anything that you're potentially hearing of people's expectations in other markets, does it feel to you, or I don't know if you'd want to put a percentage on it, or just, I mean, how you want to kind of soften it and not go, too over the skis on any of it. But in terms of Zion Williamson's fit into now Joe Dumars' New Orleans Pelicans organization moving forward, what is kind of your expectation of, from the outside, what the future could be, and particularly the immediate future?
Yeah, I mean, this is just my thought. I don't see them trading Zion in the offseason. He's still a really talented player. He makes a lot of money as well. So any sort of trade with him, who knows what the value is like for Zion right now. On one hand, he finished the season fairly strong after that midseason injury. Again, before they shut him down, he was playing really well. So do you look at it and say, like, we need to cut bait before he potentially injures himself again? On the other hand, he's 24. He'll be 25 in July. He's still a fairly young guy who could get things back on track from a health standpoint and have a good 5, 6, 7 years left to go as kind of a, all NBA caliber player if he can, reach those games played threshold and get the right team built around him. I think the Pelicans started making the moves with Brandon Ingram. They've got Trey Murphy, who's a really good player as well, really good young talent. I wonder if they try to make moves around the edges as opposed to kind of their two main guys. CJ McCollum is still a really effective scorer. He's on an expiring deal. I know people love Herbert Jones, but is there a world where you get rid of Herb Jones but keep Trey Murphy? There's kind of some positional, a lot of kind of wing forward type players there, and maybe there's some overlap, and then try to build around that. So I don't see Zion being traded, in the offseason. Again, this is just my personal opinion. If the Pelicans get off to a average to below average start next year and Zion is healthy going into January, then maybe do you start to have the conversation where he's kind of proving his wealth and proving that he can stay healthy? That's a move that needs to be made to kind of initiate sort of a rebuild. We'll see. Again, Joe Dumars is a smart enough guy to put the right people around them to kind of make the best decision, or where he thinks is the best decision. And also working in the league office for the past 3 or 4 years, he's got connections with every team in the league and probably has a fairly good idea of what Zion's market is going into the offseason and what it might be, 8 months from now, leading in the next year's trade deadline or whatever. So, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. The West is just so tough. Do you just try to compete and get into the dance like like a seventh or eighth seed and hope that the right things happen, or do you want to try to, tear it all down and start from scratch, or do you want to hope that maybe the rebuild gets accelerated? I don't want to say accidentally, but that's kind of what happened with Portland this year. Portland was hovering around the play-in tournament for the last couple of weeks of the season. I don't think anybody anticipated them doing that, but now they have a really good idea of who their building blocks are, what young players they probably don't want to let go of, young players maybe they want to get some additional assets for. There's so many different examples of like what to do around the league. I'm lucky and I'm glad that I'm not the person who has to make that decision for the Pelicans or any organization really, because I don't think I can handle it. I'm stressed just thinking about it.
The good news, if the Pels did decide to move off of Zion, is that we now know that the market for an injury-prone front court player is Luka Doncic. So you can go ahead and trade Zion for a generational scorer if you need to.
Something like that. I think that's a little. Yeah, sure, we'll go with that. I think it's a little disrespectful to Anthony Davis, but I get where you're coming from.
Diving into the actual playoff side of things, we won't get like crazy into a lot of detail here. Obviously, the Pels were far away from this year's playoffs, and we knew that they weren't going to be a part of it for several months now. But atop of the Eastern Conference, you have the reigning champion Boston Celtics as the 2 seed, a Cleveland Cavaliers team that took a huge step forward this year. And last time we saw each other, we're watching the Cavs get the best of the Celtics and show their capability of going into Boston and getting a win. In the West, Oklahoma City has been the team that's been kind of the pole position team throughout the bulk of the year. Young Thunder continuing to grow up really, really quickly, a 68-win team this year. Speaking of growing up quickly, Houston Rockets, the 2 seed, that Luka and LeBron Lakers team, the 3 seed, and then that Denver Nuggets team we mentioned, who, just a couple years removed from a championship and now has fired its coach, but still has Joker and some other key pieces there still in place from that championship run there, the 4 seed. As you go into this year's playoffs, what's kind of just overarching outlook for this? Do you see a team as a team to beat, or do you see kind of a core couple of teams? How many do you view as realistic contenders in 2025?
Well, first off, I'll say that game was not the last time we saw each other, because I was in Baton Rouge a couple of weeks after that for Jay Shelley's event.
Oh, yeah.
The game you're talking about was the Friday of Mardi Gras. Yeah, so just correcting you there. I have seen you since then. We plan to see you again after that, but we won't talk about the non-trip that happened. One thing is, and I'm not sure when this is going to run, but the Friday before the playoffs, we're publishing at The Athletic John Hollinger's massive playoff preview, and he's brought this up before in what he's written. He's kind of got a stat that looks at, and if I'm getting this, I hope I'm getting this correct, but 52 wins, a +3 scoring margin, and a top 3 seed. And if I'm not mistaken, I think 44 of the past 45 or 45 of the past 46 champions have all hit those marks. The only one that didn't was the 95 Rockets, who of course were the 6th seed and kind of just flip the switch in terms of defending their championship. So looking at those benchmarks, only 4 teams have hit that this season. It's the Cavs, the Celtics, the Thunder, and the Rockets barely squeaking by on that 52 win mark. So it seems like based on the regular season, those teams are maybe head and shoulders above the rest. But one thing that he also brings up is that a lot of these teams just look, particularly the Lakers and the Warriors, look a lot different now than they did the first 4 months of the season. So how much do you put into their record versus like what they've looked like more recently? I think it's going to be tough because it looks like the East is going to eventually come down to Cleveland and Boston. I think that's kind of what everybody assumes. New York has beaten up on teams that it should beat, but has also struggled against the Cavs and the Celtics this season. Who knows what the health of Damian Lillard is going to be, and how long it takes him to kind of get back on track. You got the Pacers, who I think a lot of people are kind of forgetting about, made the conference finals last year, and after kind of a slow start, they've been really, really good. The thing will be with them is to see whether the defense holds up, but it seems like that's what's going to happen in the East, and the Thunder maybe don't have, I don't want to say have an easier path, but they're not going to go up against another juggernaut, 60-win team in the conference finals. So it'll be interesting to see if that helps them. The one team I'm looking at in the West in particular, and I'm not saying that they can make the finals, but if they ended up in the conference finals, I don't think I would be surprised in the least. If the Clippers keep playing the way that they've been playing recently, I think they've won, if I'm not mistaken, 14 of 16 or 15 of 17, something like that. And the two losses have been to OKC and Cleveland by a combined 6 or 7 points. Kawhi Leonard is, probably 80 to 85% of the Kawhi Leonard of old. He's not as impactful defensively for the course of a full game as maybe he used to be. He kind of has to pick and choose his spots, but he's still physical. He's still strong. He can still shoot lights out. He's still a great rebounder, playmaker, all that stuff. The way that they've been playing recently and the contribution that they've got, Chris Dunn has kind of been their really strong point of attack defender. Bogdan Bogdanovic just kind of lighting it up off the bench. If they, it wouldn't shock me if they beat Denver in round one, and it would not shock me if they push the Thunder in round two as well. That'll be just if that matchup happens, it'll be a matchup of just kind of completely different styles, right? Like the Thunder have 2 7-footers that they play regularly. The Clippers start Kawhi Leonard, who's like 6'7" at power forward, essentially. It'll be interesting to see like what team ends up playing in that other team's style more often. If OKC like only plays with one big on the court to match up with the Clippers, or if the Clippers just kind of, try to go completely small ball or try to match up with like Nick Batum more regularly at power forward, who still is not a 7-footer. So I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I think the Clippers have played really well recently. And if they can, they're going to be a hard matchup for the Nuggets. And if they get hot, and again, Kawhi Leonard is not going to have to play back-to-backs or anything in the playoffs, has a week off now. They are a fun team to watch and maybe a scary team for, again, OKC is pushing 70 wins, but they still haven't gotten past the second round with this group of players. Didn't make the playoffs 2 years ago. Last year, lost in the second round to a red-hot Dallas team. A finals appearance for them is not something that's just like anointed in a way. Some of these guys kind of have to get their reps and kind of go through it. We saw that with teams in the past, like Boston. We saw that with Denver, who had a conference finals loss before they made it to the finals. So that team, the Clippers, actually both teams in LA are probably interesting teams to watch just because of the experience they have. I probably would have said Denver as well, maybe before Michael Malone got fired. Denver's lack of depth is probably a little bit less of a problem in the playoffs when you're only playing, 8 guys, maybe 9 guys, as opposed to like trying to get through the regular season. But the West is going to be a battle. It's going to be really, really tough. And we didn't even talk about the Warriors and the Rockets. So,
yeah, which is, to me, right up there among the most intriguing first-round matchups that we've got, which I'm going to kind of lead into and ask you about next. But so much, too, we talk about this every year, but for folks that maybe don't pay as close of attention to the full run of the playoffs, who's healthy at the right time, who stays healthy through the run of this thing can be such a storyline through, what is pushing a 2-month-long tournament of the NBA playoffs as well. And for the Clippers, if Kawhi is healthy, which has been what has been elusive for him and them through his tenure there, they're as dangerous as it seems like anyone in the West down the stretch you threw together. Some of the numbers there of the streak that they've been on to close the season. But it was interesting to me to hear you say for Cleveland and Boston, because they have those 2 of the top 3 teams that would have to face in the conference finals, that, maybe that it's not an easier road for the Thunder, but at least they don't have another team on that same par. To me, though, I think 7 of the top maybe 10 teams in the playoffs are in that Western Conference. And so it's pretty tightly packed. And and going to get pretty interesting. When you look at some of these first round series, I guess give me, and you can rank them in order or whatever, the 3 first round series of what we're about to see of 8 first round series total that are the most intriguing to you. And I'm not real worried about who wins these 8 seeds, because I feel like that's not the 8s are probably not going to be in either of our top 3, but which 3 series stand out to you as you're kind of looking at the weekend that feel like they're or the week ahead, the ones that you're most excited about or most intrigued by the way the matchups look?
Yeah, I mean, one of them I mentioned, Clippers Nuggets. I think they kind of play similarly. Like, the Nuggets have a little bit more length in terms of like Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon, but like neither of those guys are like as big as Jokic, and so they can probably. It'll be interesting to see how they decide to defend Nikola Jokic and slow him down, because you can't stop him. But if Kawhi and James Harden are both cooking, Jamal Murray's been a little banged up. Russell Westbrook is not known for his defense. Kind of what the matchups are going to look like, and again, I think the Clippers have a nice kind of 8-man rotation if you look at it with Derrick Jones Jr. They got Coffee, Bogdanovich, and even Ben Simmons has been hurt recently, but when he first got to the Clippers, his assist to turnover ratio was pretty good, and he was just kind of doing some playmaking, ball handling, kind of in a perfect Draymond, very very light Draymond Green role off the bench, of where a point forward, and if they can get productive minutes out of him, just to maybe give Denver a different look from a lineup perspective, whether it be Simmons being point guard or center. I think that's a really interesting series. I think the Lakers and Timberwolves is an interesting series as well, kind of similar to what we were talking about with the Thunder and the Clippers size-wise. Like, the Timberwolves have Julius Randle and Rudy Gobert, 2 guys who are 6'9" and above. The Lakers, a lot of times, are playing Dorian Finney-Smith at center. They want to go. They prefer to go small ball, but they're not small. Their small ball is just kind of like a lot of guys who are between 6'5" and 6'8". It's not like a complete shift. If Anthony Edwards is just on fire, I don't know who stops him on the Lakers. I don't think it's Luka Doncic. I think Austin Reeves is a smart defender, but he's not a guy who you just kind of want one-on-one with an Anthony Edwards all the time. So that's a series that's going to be interesting to watch. It would not shock me if the Timberwolves and the Clippers, the 5 and the 6 seeds, both win those matchups. And then I think the other one in the East that's interesting, we saw Milwaukee and Indiana face off against each other last year. They played, if I'm not mistaken, 11 times last season. 4 regular season, 1 in the NBA Cup, and then another 6 in the playoffs. Milwaukee's coming into the playoffs. I think they've won 7 or 8 in a row. That's without Damian Lillard. If he comes back and gives them something, that's a guy that you have to account for, even if Damian Lillard is on some sort of a minutes restriction. Kevin Porter Jr. has been playing really well for them recently. They're another team that has a lot of length. Taurean Prince, Kyle Kuzma, Brook Lopez. Those guys are a little bit older, but they can, they've been there. They've all, Lopez and Giannis have won titles. Kyle Kuzma has a title with the Lakers. Those are guys who've been in situations like this. So I think if I had to pick, Indiana might win that series. But if Giannis is just playing the way Giannis has played the past month or so, who knows? He's going to be the best player on the court in any series that he's in the East. And I say that with full well with Donovan Mitchell and Jason Tatum and Jalen Brunson and all those guys. We've seen Giannis just kind of take over and carry his team to a title before. So those are probably the 3 that I'm interested in. I'll mention the Pistons too, just to kind of see, what kind of, I don't want to say fight they have, because I do think the Knicks are just kind of a better team. And again, that depth, the lack of depth is a little bit less important in the playoffs, but the turnaround that the Pistons have been on is like the fact that they're in the playoffs and we're solidly in the top 6 to where like the last couple of games didn't really matter a ton for them in terms of playoffs versus play in. It's just a hell of an accomplishment. Malik Beasley, probably a candidate for 6th man of the year. I don't know if he's going to win it with Peyton Pritchard, but He's been one of the best 3-point shooters in the league. Cade Cunningham has finally gotten a team around him that, can kind of play to his strengths, put some shooting out there, and Asar Thompson can, match up with anybody in the league. So it wouldn't shock me if they, steal a couple games from New York, or even push that series to 7. Those guys in Detroit they fight for literally and figuratively, I think, at times. So it'll be interesting to see like what their first playoff experience is like. They have not won a playoff game since you and I were in college, which is an insane
holy cow
stat. The Pistons have not won a playoff game since 2008. Was the last time they won a playoff game. So that arena for Game 3 in Detroit is going to be rocking, and that the crowd might just carry them to one win just because of how amped up they're going to be. And if Detroit can take one in New York, who knows what happens. So I think I hit on half the series there, but I think all of those are pretty interesting.
Yeah, they're good. I honestly, the first two would be 2 of my top 3 as well. And then I really like the Rockets and Warriors series that we've texted about previously. I just think that's a really interesting matchup. And I think it's the one that, even going back to watching the way the season was ending for the Warriors after they let Harrison Barnes get the best of them and kind of knock them into some tough standing there and fall back into the play-in game. I think Houston is a matchup that I feel as comfortable with for them as any of the options near the top of the Western Conference standings starting out. But Houston's really good. As much as they're kind of the upstart of this group, there's someone that can give the Warriors a lot of trouble with their size and physicality and athleticism and youth. When you've got Jimmy limping into the playoffs and Steph with his thumb taped up and everything. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we've texted about this, like you said. I think like the way for Houston to win that is to just like out athleticism the Warriors, like just kind of. We've got these young guys who can fly around and run, and you don't.
We're going to beat you on the boards by like 10 plus most nights, potentially.
Yeah, like that's the way for them to do it because they're not a great shooting team. And again, we go back to the experience thing. This is a lot of their first time experience something like this. The good thing for them is they do have a champion at point guard, Fred VanVleet, who's been there and done that. And I'm interested to see, and again, we talked about this, like who's the guy when it comes to crunch time in Houston when everything breaks down and they're just like, you got to go and get a bucket, either get a bucket or get fouled. Like, is it Jalen Green? Is it Amen Thompson? Is it Fred VanVleet? Is it a combination of the 3? Because those guys can be a little streaky at times. And if everything is sort of breaking down a little more regularly than maybe the Rockets would want, I think that those are the opportunities where the Warriors can kind of potentially pounce on them. But I don't think anybody expected the Rockets, to be the 2 seed going into the season. So they're probably playing with a little bit of house money, but with Ime Udoka, I don't think he's looking at it that way. He wants to win a title.
Looking forward to these. Also excited that you kind of amped up my optimism, I guess, in that Milwaukee series. Honestly, whenever Giannis got into to Beasley about a week ago pretty well, I started to feel like, okay, Giannis has got a little chip on his shoulder that I like a lot right now going in the playoffs, but I still just worry about what they'll need from him. And again, I feel like every time we talk on here, it comes up like the Bucks essentially are my Eastern Conference team. And so I wish them well over there. But I just worry what they would need from him to help carry them through a Pacers team that has been really tough for them the last couple of years. We'll see. I also thank you, man, for, a little shout out to Ben Simmons, the 1-year LSU star Ben Simmons on the Louisiana vs. All Y'all channel. And whenever, the aggregators quote you on this, I'll remember to say Tyler Batiste. Tyler Batiste said he is the light-skinned Draymond Green, I think is.
No.
No.
No,
I know.
No, don't. I gotta remember where to clip this so I can make sure I get the right quote. It's not what he said at all.
If you think aggregators are 32 minutes
third,
into
yeah.
to the Louisiana versus all y'all NBA playoffs preview, the year that the Pels are the fourth worst team in the league of all years too. Yeah, no, I think we're all set at this point. We can honestly get sidetracked talking about TJ Miller at this point. But no, man, I appreciate you. I know you're under the weather right now and trying to gear up for a big weekend to start the playoffs. But thank you as always for chopping it up a little bit.
Appreciate you.
I'll let you go get to dinner. I'm hungry myself. Again, he's Tyler Batiste, the Athletics NBA managing editor, and I'm Jared Roser for Louisiana versus all y'all. Y'all be well. Thanks for watching.